What's up, everybody? West Virginia is off their bye week. We are still moving along. Our bye week never happened. But either way, the Mountaineers head to Stillwater this weekend where they will face Oklahoma State, an Oklahoma State team which 2 weeks ago was ranked as a top 15 team in the country. 2 weeks later, they are facing an 0-2 Big 12 record after loss to Utah and Kansas State. And now here come the Mountaineers off their bye week, hoping to go to Stillwater and get a win for the second trip in a row after they got a win in 2021. So we're going to give you all things Oklahoma State. We also have an interview with Jeff Johnson from the Oklahoma State rival site, OStateIllustrated. So we hope you stick around for that at the end. But let's start with Oklahoma State here, Keenan. So breakdown of the Cowboys, obviously at quarterback. They got Alan Bowman. He's been around longer than I've been alive, I feel. But in all seriousness, he's had a pretty good year. He's had a little up and down year, especially with the last 2 games. But 60% on the year, over 1,500 yards passing, 11 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. However, in the last 2 games, he's completed only 50% of his passes, 570 yards, 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Obviously, then the name that everyone knows about here, Ollie Gordon. We will probably dive into him a little deeper in a second, but 334 rush yards, 4 touchdowns, 12 catches, 80 yards. We'll get into him in a minute, but as we keep moving along, a couple receivers that you might know of, Brennan Presley, he's been there for a few years now. Yeah, he's been there almost as long as –
I think he caught a pass when Will Greer was there.
Yeah, well, Alan Bowman was playing when Will Greer was there too.
But, he actually was.
Yeah, Rashad Owens, Taylor Chetron, a couple names that are on that offense in the wide receiver room as well to keep an eye on. But Presley leads the group with 33 catches. He has 289 yards. Dazon Stribling, I think that's how you pronounce his name. It could be very wrong. He has 27 grabs for 502 yards and 3 touchdowns as well. So they've kind of spread the ball around, not really a go-to guy per se. Defensively, they've got a lot of guys who are at the tops of a lot of categories in the Big 12. Starts with Trey Rucker at the safety position. 63 total tackles, which leads the Big 12. 1 tackle for loss and a couple of picks. Linebacker Nick Martin, who you will find out about in our interview with Jeff Johnson, that he is listed as questionable, and he is a mainstay on that Oklahoma State defense. Trey Rucker was first in the Big 12 in tackles. Nick Martin is second in the Big 12 in tackles, also second in tackles for loss. Another safety they got is Kendall Daniels, who has 26 tackles, 4 for a loss, 2 sacks. Defensive end, Obi Ezigbo. Man, these names are just great. They have great names. 22 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. He's 5th in the Big 12 in tackles for loss. And then at the kicking position, Logan Ward, 10 of 13 on field goals. He's made 1 from 52 this year, 3 of 5 on kicks from 40 to 49 yards, and his only other miss came between 30 and 39. So there's a quick rundown of the Cowboys. Keenan, what are your thoughts on Oklahoma State as the Mountaineers prepare to face the Cowboys this weekend?
3-2 football team. 2 of their losses, though, are arguably 2 of the top 3 teams in the league. I think everyone would agree Utah and Kansas State are at the top at this point. So I'm not necessarily sure that their record is indicative of how good or bad they are as a football team. I think the thing that stands out to me the most about this team is some of the numbers. You know, you look at they're struggling to run the ball, which is, I mean, we all remember the run that Ollie Gordon had at the end of last year. They're struggling to run the ball, and they're struggling to defend. Really,
yeah. I've got some numbers on that. Oklahoma State, they're 14th in the Big 12 in rush yards per game on offense, and
14th.
then on
Who would have called that?
102.2 rush yards per game. I feel like Ollie Gordon had that on 2 back-to-back drives this time last year in Morgantown. But on the flip side, on defense, they're 13th in the Big 12 in points per game, 16th which is last in total yards per game, last in rush yards per game, and second to last in pass yards per game. Like, they are giving up yards and yards and yards and yards and yards.
Any way you want it, apparently.
Yeah.
Any way you want it. Yeah. And, you know, I think that, like, that right there to me is one of the biggest surprises. I know Ollie Gordon, we'll talk about it here in a bit, but defensively, just their struggles. You know, Oklahoma State has won games with their defense against West Virginia in the last couple of years. You know, making a play, you know, getting a stop. And this unit's struggling, and especially against the run. Do you think on paper that's a good matchup for West Virginia? You know, they've struggled against the run with running quarterbacks, and that kind of thing plays. You know, and I think that when you look at the matchups, you know, that's why I said this on our last podcast. You know, I was kind of tilting a little bit on this game, and you look at the matchups, and I think that West Virginia has a better chance on paper. Now, games aren't won on paper, but on paper,
Way to emphasize the on paper there.
than they ever did at any point that I ever gave them credit for coming into this. So I think that this Oklahoma State team is your kind of typical offensive team. They want to try to run the football. They haven't been able to effectively, but they can still run it a little bit. Alan Bowman is what he is, gets the football out quick. He's got big, fast wide receivers. Presley in the slot. He's got guys he can throw it to. Can West Virginia tackle him on defense, and can they stop Ollie Gordon? Because they were right in the middle of that train when it got going last year. You'd like to not be on that side of the thing this year because he's averaging 3.8 per carry. He only did that in 2 games after he started going last year, and those were games where they got embarrassed at UCF, and Texas just completely sold out to stop him. So I think that's pretty indicative. So him is offensively, want to deny it or not, and if he isn't going, that opens up some pathways for West Virginia, team that, when you look on paper, has done well against the run for the most part outside that Kansas game, but I think some of that was by design. They were going to give Kansas some run things to take away some of the things down the field, but they've struggled against the pass. So we'll see which one wins out. And, if West Virginia is able to get Bowman in some difficult situations and force him to try to beat them with his arm, I think that bodes well for West Virginia.
Yeah, the big thing on Ollie Gordon is he just hasn't had those eye-popping numbers that we're used to. He rushed and rushed and rushed and rushed last year. And 334 rush yards, 4 touchdowns, that just isn't what we thought we would see, I don't think, through 5 games for Oklahoma State. Last week against Kansas State, it seemed like he was going to have his coming out party to an extent. He had 9 carries for 72 yards in the first quarter. But then he finished the day with 15 carries for 76 yards and then didn't see the field in the fourth quarter as Oklahoma State lost 42-20. So, if you're West Virginia, if you can stop him early and kind of force that game onto Bowman and force some anxiety with them, because it's no secret that they want to get him going. Neil Brown said that. Everyone knows what Oklahoma State really eventually wants to get to. It's just a matter of when will they get to it, or if they get to it, how successful and sustained will that be? And so I think for West Virginia is that first quarter is going to be more crucial than ever in terms of how can you kind of make a statement of this is not going to be the day that he kind of finds his stride.
Yeah, you got to win up front. I mean, it really matters. The linebackers are going to have to fit, safeties, all that stuff's going to have to come into play. And I think you're okay with giving up some things in the pass game if you're able to kind of control their run game and make them kind of go out of their comfort zone. Bowman has good numbers right now, but, we've talked, I talked to Jeff this week over at our Oklahoma State site, and he's, he is who he is in a sense. He's not, he's gotten better in some areas, struggled in others, but I think that you want to try to make him beat you with his arm. Yes, they have the skill set. They do have wide receivers that can make those plays and make things difficult on you. But we've seen Ollie Gordon take over a game, and not just the West Virginia game. You got to forget he wasn't really even a full-time player 3 or 4 games into the season last year. He was splitting that backfield with a lot of different guys, and when he got that thing, he was the best running back in college football, in my opinion. I mean, the guy just looked different. I went back and watched some stuff leading up to which, I kind of had it in the vault. I hadn't wanted to watch it, but I went back and watched some of that Oklahoma State game, and he turned some runs that there was nothing there. Now, the late runs, West Virginia was trying to really sell out and stop. I mean, you missed one fit, and it was busted. But I think early in the game, even some runs that weren't there, he has a special way to break tackles and stretch things and make things happen, and his contact balance is really impressive.
Yeah, I just think this is what stands out to me. It's last year against West Virginia, I wrote down he had 282 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns. That's basically more or less his stats from this year, give or take 50-ish yards, right? So that's what stands out is his 5-game production is similar to an extent of what he did against the Mountaineers last year. And so does he figure it out? Do they figure it out? Do they get it going? I know Jeff on our conversation with him later on said the play calling kind of has a little bit to do with it. And there's a little bit of frustration and angst there. So that's what I think we're all going to be looking out for early on.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the matchup for West Virginia. West Virginia is not – it's going to kind of be or like earlier in the year, they didn't want to let Desmond Reed beat them from Pitt. They don't want to let Ollie Gordon beat them. If they beat them, they're going to lose in other ways. I think that we'll see how it plays out if Jordan Leslie dials up the right calls.
Let's talk about Oklahoma State a little bit in the spot they're in. Obviously, they opened the season 3-0, wins against South Dakota State, Arkansas, and Tulsa. That Arkansas win was a double overtime win. But then back-to-back weeks with losses to open their Big 12 slate. They had no slouch on their schedule, playing Utah at home, losing by 3, and then going on the road to K-State, who they themselves were coming off a loss to BYU. So they're in an interesting spot, similar to this Kansas team 2 weeks ago when West Virginia played them in a desperation mode, in a sense of like they know they've got to win. If they have any aspirations of getting to Dallas and getting back there, it's you've got to kind of win now, because staring down the barrel of an 0-3 start, that's probably not getting you anywhere that you dreamed of getting to if you're Oklahoma State. So do you think that desperation kind of comes into play in this game at all, Keno?
It has to. And it almost has to if you're Oklahoma State. You lose 3, you're not going to the league title game. I just don't see any way there's a pathway for that. There's too many teams. Not every team is going to play each other. I guess it is possible, but it'd be almost like the Doctor Strange deal. But there's only one way maybe that a team is getting in with 3 if everybody beats each other up. But then that'll open up another discussion that probably the Big 12 doesn't want to have if there's a bunch of 3-loss teams. So I think that you're going to get their best. Really, Oklahoma State is kind of where West Virginia was after the Pitt loss. We mentioned gut check and rally the troops and all the colorful phrases you can use to try to get things together. That's kind of where Oklahoma State's at right now. And West Virginia is going to get their best shot. I don't think you're going to ease into this. Mike Gundy's done this before. He's turned teams around. Look at last year. And that's not the only example of this where they've looked really bad at times earlier in the year, but they figure it out. Guy's an excellent coach. He's a little eccentric sometimes, but I like him. But he's definitely an excellent coach, and he's proven it over the years. I think that it's a chance for West Virginia, too. We're sitting here talking about Oklahoma State, but this is a chance for West Virginia to go down to Stillwater. Yeah, they've won twice down there, since they've been in the Big 12, but that 2014 Oklahoma State team wasn't very good. The 2022 team wasn't very good. So this is a chance to go down there and beat an Oklahoma State team that even at 3-3 you would argue is the best team that West Virginia would have beaten, of them, in terms of on the road. So, yeah, I think it's a big game for both teams. West Virginia, if I could tell you after that Pitt loss, and I know that the people are probably
I know what's about to come out of here. I know exactly what you're going to say next.
If I could tell you that, you would have taken it, because after that Pitt loss, West Virginia's season was kind of teetering. Now I'm getting cart before the horse here, but if West Virginia can win this game, you're setting it 3-2, 2-0 in the Big 12, and a home game.
Yeah,
a coal rush game. I know you're excited about that.
Top 15 team.
I know you're excited about the coal rush game. So you get that type of atmosphere. You can't manufacture momentum. You have to earn it. And Neil kind of went against this, said momentum.
He went way against it on Monday.
Confidence, whatever you want to call it. I think he's talking about the same thing, just different words. But if you can't just say, "Hey, we got momentum now. We got confidence now." You got to earn it, and what better way to earn it than to get the ghosts of Stillwater Pass off your back?
Yeah, like Mike Gundy in his last 9 games against West Virginia since 2015 is 8-1, and that one loss came at home in a monsoon in the last game of the regular season, and so.
Most of them have been close, though.
Yeah, especially on the road. Obviously, I know like in 2021 when West Virginia hosted Oklahoma State, it was just a beatdown, but they've kept it close on the road. I know you mentioned something like that on our message board today.
Yeah, there's 2 of them that stand out to me that were bad. The one here, the one where West Virginia could not do anything offensively. And then there was one down there, I think it was 2016, when West Virginia had a pretty good team, and Oklahoma State was just better than them. Even 2020, when West Virginia down there, they turned the ball over late and Oklahoma State got a score. So they've kept it close at times, but it's not horseshoes or hand grenades. It doesn't count. Close doesn't count. You have to be able to win games. And really that brings us back to a much larger discussion that we've talked about enough at this point, which has been a consistent theme of the Neil Brown era.
Let's go to injuries for the Mountaineers. Obviously, the bye week probably came at a really good time as far as health goes, especially with the way that Kansas game ended. From the sounds of things, it sounds like Aubrey Burks will be back, which is a huge plus for the Mountaineers. It sounds like Preston Fox should be back. I know Reed Carrico should be back as well. I feel like he was playing really well, especially in that big game. And so those are three guys that I think they'll welcome back with open arms, obviously, especially those two defensive guys. I'm interested to see how Preston and Rodney's roles kind of maybe vary on offense, especially with the emergence of Rodney against Kansas. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. But the guys who still are questionable, TJ Crandall, who's your starting, who did start that Kansas game, and then Justin Robinson. Yep, at that receiver position. Him too. The last play he made was a fantastic play, right? So you could kind of get all the help you can get. So let's go to keys to victory. First key for me is kind of keep that Oklahoma State defense on the field. Oklahoma State is last in time of possession in the Big 12 this year. If you're West Virginia, you can control that clock and you can finish those drives and finish them with points and finish it with 7 instead of 3. You're going to give yourself a real good chance to win that game, especially late in the game, in the third quarter, fourth quarter. If you're keeping that Oklahoma State defense on the field for long periods of time, good things are bound to happen if you're West Virginia, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, and it kind of plays into one of my keys. I think it's kind of let Garrett run. Don't be afraid to let Garrett run. This offense functions better. I know you want to keep him healthy, but this offense unquestionably functions better when that's a part of it. And you saw that late against Kansas. That doesn't mean you have to go into 2-minute offense the whole game, but play a little bit more up tempo at times when it presents itself. Let Garrett use his legs though. Let him get out, make some throws on the run. And even if it's 1 read, 2 read, take off, whatever you need to do to make him feel comfortable, because Oklahoma State struggled with there as well. You saw it against Avery Johnson, who made me look stupid last week with what he did. So it wouldn't be the first time, definitely won't be the last. But I think that if you're able to get Garrett involved in the run game and West Virginia is able to run the football on a team that has really struggled to stop it, that makes this game much more winnable. Now, if West Virginia struggles to run the football, I don't like their matchup there.
Yeah, I think we've talked about Garrett running the ball for each of the last 3 games now, before Pitt, before Kansas, and here now before Oklahoma State. It's just got to be more of a thing. And we both understand the risk of that. I think everyone understands the risk of that. But risk versus reward, this reward is pretty high because this offense is highly, highly functional when he's running the ball, when he's just doing Garrett. And they've got to let Garrett be Garrett at some point. I think the bye week, you'll see some adjustments, especially as far as scheme goes of trying to get him more involved. But even think back to last year, there were a lot more designed runs than what we've seen. We've seen him scramble more than anything. And so maybe there's a couple more designed runs, maybe a couple more of those reads or keepers rather than just give it to Jaheim or CJ. And so that's interesting for me. But then one more thing is like the play of the secondary is it's got to continue because they played well at times against Kansas, and Oklahoma State's a team that no one really has touched as far as defensive pressure goes. They've allowed 1 sack all year, I believe. And so you've got to be able to hold up on the back end, especially when your front is not likely going to get to Alan Bowman. And so that's the big thing for me is they were going to want to get the ball out quick. Can you stop it? Can you force it into 2nd and long, 3rd and long, and then kind of have everything in front of you rather than you're kind of playing on your heels? I'm interested to see with what a week off does for this secondary as far as trying to figure things out. I know they were trying to figure things out on the fly, and that's not always the easiest thing to do. So what changes between that Kansas game and what can they carry over that was a positive from that Kansas game into this Oklahoma State game secondary-wise?
We didn't rehearse these, but mine's very similar as well. You obviously stop Ollie Gordon is the priority. We already discussed that. But when Oklahoma State is able to throw, get them on the ground. You can't let little plays become big plays, and they have a lot of explosive plays off their RPO stuff, and really it's being out of position, guys missing a tackle, and a little play turns into a big play. And you don't want to give this offense on the road a chance to build momentum when they've had their own issues. I think as long as West Virginia is able to do those things, they're going to have a great chance. And I can't remember how many times. I think 2018 might be the last time I've said that West Virginia has a great chance to win in Stillwater. Of course, we all know how that one ended up, unfortunately. But apparently I'm just reminiscing with awful defeats today. But I think that –
well, I think there's a common denominator here, and it might be Oklahoma State. But
yeah, there's been some heartbreakers there.
Well, let's segue into picks then, shall we? If you're giving them a great chance, does this mean that you're going to pick them this week?
It is. I'm going back on it.
Oh.
I'm going back on it. You got to show a little bit of face sometimes, and I'm not sure if West Virginia is a better football team than Oklahoma State right now, but Oklahoma State's dealing with a lot of issues, and where they're bad, West Virginia's good. And I'm a matchup guy, and really where West Virginia is their worst, Oklahoma State is okay. So I think that just where Oklahoma State's at, the struggles they've had, they're not coming off a bye week like West Virginia is. So I'm going to take them in a close game. I think at 35-31 West Virginia. And I could be completely wrong. I obviously was on the pick game, but I did call Kansas right. So there is that.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you. I think it's the first time we have a disagreement in our predictions.
You're going the smart way.
Well, I'm just going the way of I don't see a world where Oklahoma State, who was 13th in the country 2 weeks ago, starts Big 12 play 0-3. I'm also just – when has a Neil Brown team gone on the road and beaten a quality opponent in recent history? Like, they just really haven't done that. Last year they won some road games, but outside of that, it just really hasn't happened. Also, Mike Gundy seems to own this West Virginia team, and I don't know. I just got a bad feeling about this one.
It took everything I had to go the other way because, I've been on there, since our season preview prediction.
Well, I read it in your 3-2-1 on Monday, and I was like, I purposely didn't text or anything. I was like, we're going to bring it up now, obviously.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. I like the matchup, and now all this is being said, West Virginia cannot go and allow Ollie Gordon to run for 100 yards in the first quarter. I mean, if they allow him to get loose, it's going to be a long day for West Virginia. But you're right. This is kind of a prove-it game for me in a sense that go on the road and beat a team like this because I think those concerns are valid. Show you can have some consistency, and West Virginia's not been able to do that. So this is more of a pick out of a leap of faith in a sense for me, but I do like the matchup more than I typically do when these teams play.
For me, it's just that there was someone, I forget who he was. It might have been first name Keenan, last name Cummings before the season that said, I just need people to show me that they can do it before I back them and believe them. And
it's true.
I have to see this West Virginia team show me and do it before I back them and believe them. But
I have seen them win in Stillwater before, though. So,
but what I will say though is, you make a good point. If they come back for 2-0 in Morgantown playing Rocco Beckton Company in Iowa State, it could get crazy. But I'll take Oklahoma State here. I think they figure things out. Mike Gundy's a really good head coach. He knows what he's doing.
He's very
been doing
good
it for a long time. And Ollie Gordon's a really good player. And while West Virginia stopped the run this year, I just think that they might get beat in other areas. And as much as I think that you're right, they do match up well and they do have a shot, I think it's going to be close to the end. I'm going to go Oklahoma State 37, West Virginia 31.
I'll put it this way.
Okay.
I do not see any pathway for West Virginia winning this game by like 2 scores.
Oh,
if they win,
no.
they win by a close margin. I can see Oklahoma State winning by 2 scores if they go out and hit on all cylinders at home. So it's a risky pick for me, but I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, I think the start is going to be crucial for both teams. If West Virginia kind of can own those first kind of 10 minutes, I mean, we know they love to take the ball after the kickoff. So to some people's hatred, but there's a likely chance that they'll probably get the ball. If they go down the field, score, get a stop, who knows what after that, then they could really put Oklahoma State on their heels. So you got anything else before we kick into this interview with Jeff?
No, it's spooky season though, so it's a time of the year to get weird and
October.
Yeah, enjoy some football. Hopefully next week we're not talking about Brocktober like we were a few years ago, but it'll be good. I'm excited for this game. I really want to see how West Virginia performs. There's you I don't want to say you saved yourself, but you avoided a disaster.
You delayed your burial.
And now you have a chance to really, I don't want to say convince because I'm not sure this win will convince, but it'll at least open people's eyes if you're able to go on the road and win this game. So we'll see if they have it in them.
I just can't wait. If West Virginia wins this game, everyone's gonna say, but they beat an 0-3 Oklahoma State team in the Big 12. Are they really that good? But that's neither here nor there. We're gonna kick it to an interview with Jeff Johnson from OStateIllustrated. It is our pleasure to be joined by Jeff Johnson of Oklahoma State's rival site, and he is here to talk to us about all things Oklahoma State. So, Jeff, first things first, just your overall thoughts on where Oklahoma State is coming off 2 back-to-back losses to open Big 12 play.
Yeah, definitely a couple of disappointing losses. Not really expected. On the other hand, looking at the schedule going into this season, it was obviously going to be a tough stretch with Utah and Kansas State back to back. It's like a lot of the preseason polls had both those teams ahead of Oklahoma State. But with all the returning starters they have across the board, I mean, one of the most experienced teams in college football, if not the most experienced. I think Oklahoma State fans were expecting a little more than what they've seen the last 2 weeks.
Is there, Gundy's done this before. He's been able to turn teams around. I mean, even
last year.
Yeah, I mean, is there, I don't want to say panic, but is there less of a panic just because he has a track record of being able to do this?
Probably to some degree, and like you said, reaching back to just a year ago, fan base wise, perception wise, things were probably worse a year ago through 3 games at least. That loss to South Alabama was bad. There is no other way to put that than that was just one of the worst losses in the Mike Gundy tenure. And they really, at that point, didn't have anything going for them at all. But then you saw Ollie Gordon start to emerge. That made a huge difference. Some of the issues that were there last year are the exact same this year. Run blocking has not been very good. Pass blocking, they've been pretty good. Ollie Gordon hadn't really gotten going. Alan Bowman has moments where he's pretty good and moments where he's really, really not good. And so there are a lot of similarities to last year, but maybe not as many signs as to give the fan base encouragement that, hey, things are going to get better.
I know you mentioned Ollie Gordon there. Obviously, I think for West Virginia fans, they know how well he played last year when Oklahoma
he's still
State
scoring touchdowns.
Yeah, he's still running. But the numbers aren't really popping off the page for him, but I think like that first quarter against Kansas State does pop off the page. Is there a sense that he's kind of close to figuring out or getting to that point where he was in that second half of last year?
I think a lot of it comes down to play calling. Mike Gundy went into this after the game and then again on Monday in his media luncheon and he reached back to his mom, who, if she was still alive, would say, that group of plays was working for you. Why did you go away and do something else? Keep running those until K-State shows they can stop them, which to me kind of indicates, Gundy has pretty consistently through the year, maybe the Tulsa game as an exception. That one was pretty much entirely in Oklahoma State's favor. But the rest of them has expressed each game, even once they won, that he wasn't real happy with how the coaching staff coached, how the coaching staff prepared schemes, game plans, that type of thing. So I think there's probably some discord there, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, because right now this is not a good offense. And you're seeing teams, which you saw with the West Virginia game maybe last year, but it continued on after that teams weren't really scheming to stop Ollie Gordon last year until late in the year when he was putting up monster numbers. This year, everybody's scheming to stop him, putting one extra guy in the box almost all the time, sometimes an extra half on top of that, or maybe even a second guy in the box. And Oklahoma State has not proven at this point, despite having a lot of weapons on the outside at receiver, not proven to have the ability to make teams pay for that approach where they're focused on Gordon.
I know you mentioned Alan Bowman kind of inconsistent. You look at his numbers; they look pretty good, but numbers don't always tell the story. What has he done well? What has he struggled with?
Same things he struggled with at times last year, and I don't want to. I was about to say I don't want to dog on a kid, but he's 25 years old, so he's a full-grown man. There is, to me, and was last year too. You probably saw it some in that West Virginia game. Those two bad injuries he had dating back to 2018, 2019 at Texas Tech, a couple of collapsed lungs. I mean, that's a freak deal. You don't hear about that often in football, but there is lingering effects there. The guy just does not step into throws, and didn't do it last year. He has a strong arm, but it's not that strong. It's not John Elway type where he can get away with it. And that leads to a lot of different problems down the road. Underthrown receivers, overthrown receivers at time. Trying to put too much into it. Where he's gotten better, or at least did early in the year, I think you've seen it drop off somewhat the last couple of games, is going through progressions. Finding that second, third guy. K-State, that didn't really happen so much, and it really kind of showed up in OSU's ability to really get anything going, particularly in the second half. Beyond that, he is a game manager. He does that well. A little less prone this year versus last year. Last year, he got any pressure, he was going to get out of the pocket too quickly and then throw the ball away. Now, look to make something happen. Has been a little bit better about that this year.
Going back to that Kansas State game, Oklahoma State still managed to get almost 500 yards of total offense. Just was it the defense just not playing well or just not finishing drives? Kind of, what do you think led to the lopsided loss there when they obviously had success moving the ball, at least on offense?
For years, Oklahoma State has struggled with the quarterback run game. There were some exceptions there when Jim Knowles was in as the defensive coordinator and had one of his last year at Oklahoma State. That was one of the best defenses in the country. On par with some of the SEC defenses. But with that exception, quarterback run game spinning an Achilles heel. 2 years under Brian Nardo, that's been a bit of an Achilles heel, along with the big play. A lot of times it's busts in coverage. K-State, they had a bad one on a long touchdown pass where it was a pick play, and two defenders got their legs tangled up with each other. What even really about the pick, other than it put them, in the same proximity. The guy covering the receiver that ultimately ended up scoring, and he was wide open. That's because the guy that was on him was laying down 20 yards upfield because he got tripped. But just in general, busting coverage, allowing the big play, allowing a quarterback to sneak out, which you saw in the K-State game with Avery Johnson, is an Achilles heel, and it's a concern for Oklahoma State going into this weekend.
I wanted to ask you, too, you mentioned that the run blocking has been inconsistent, but you look at their numbers pass blocking, giving up like 1 or 2 sacks, something like that. Is that more a product of Bowman getting the football out quick, or are they playing well in that department?
Yes, definitely the former as far as that goes. I think it's both, but his time from taking the snap to getting rid of the football, and this, again, goes back to what we were talking about, where he made some improvement versus last year. But the last 2 games, I think you've seen it fall off on. He is looking to get the ball, find a receiver, and get rid of it as quick as possible, which certainly is going to help run your pass block on your offensive line. Yeah. And, on top of that, they have blocked it pretty well. So it's really kind of a combination of the 2 things you mentioned there.
Okay. Switching to the other side, I feel like there's been only talk about Oklahoma State's offense, but the defense. When you look at the individual numbers, it seems like there's a lot of production there just from the individual numbers. But then when you look at the team totals, they're near the bottom of the Big 12 in a lot of kind of team defense statistics. Where's the defense really? Are they closer to being a better defense, or just are what they seem to be?
I'm going to go with what they seem to be, because it's kind of been that way for a season and a half now with Brian Nardo at the helm. You see from game to game some improvements here or there, but some of the same issues keep cropping up. Personnel wise, definitely you've got a lot of production with Trey Rucker, Nick Martin, two of the leading tacklers in the country. Which, by the way, Nick Martin was hurt at the end of the K-State game. His status, we don't really know. going into this weekend. But losing him at middle linebackers, a big loss for the Oklahoma State defense. If in fact he's not able to go on Saturday. Trey Rucker's a safety. It's great that you have a guy. He's really good in run support, but still, at the end of the day, he's a safety. If he's making most of your tackles, that's indicative that you're not doing what needs to be done up front. And defensive line play. Colin Oliver, who's a guy who's pretty well terrorized the Big 12 for 3 or 4 years, starting as a true freshman. He's out for an extended period of time. Definitely will be out for Saturday against West Virginia. That's altered things in their ability to be disruptive, particularly in the pass game. And the Oklahoma State defensive line across the board hasn't been a big factor. And I think that leads to a lot of the other things we've already talked about as far as busts and big plays. If you're not getting pressure up front, it makes it harder on the back seven for sure.
Even with the struggles being mentioned, are they still a team that West Virginia for years now has struggled with the way that their cornerbacks play? Man coverage, press man, that kind of thing. Are they still kind of using that same kind of scheme, even with what their struggles up front?
Somewhat, and they do have the benefit of Corey Black. His little brother maybe is better known because he was a big time recruit last year that Oklahoma State was in on towards the end, wound up going to Texas. But in any event, Corey, the older brother, has developed into a real true shutdown type corner. You don't see teams go his way very often. If you can shut down one half of the field with one guy, that works pretty well. So they're pretty well stuck with it. And when they stay assignment sound, the secondary is pretty good. It's just those handful of plays every game. And when you've got an offense that's really kind of struggling the way Oklahoma State's had, that's a bad recipe. If you're giving up 3, 4, 5 big plays a game that lead to scores, lead to touchdowns, or are touchdowns, you're putting your offense in a hole. Offense has not been able to come out and sustain drives, and it just snowballs. The defense in that K-State game was on the field a lot. Oklahoma State put up decent yardage numbers offensively, but they lost the time of possession pretty badly in a game where it probably shouldn't have. But so therefore the defense is on the field a lot. That's just going to compound the problems that are there that we've already kind of hit on.
It kind of reminds me of something back when Dana was here. I always used to say you can't score yards. Yards
Right.
look nice on a stat sheet, but it doesn't really matter in the end.
Yeah, Oklahoma State fans would definitely take the Dana Holgorsen years offensively. The flip side to that argument is
I think everyone would take the Dana years offensively.
Oh yeah. But why you can't score off yards? Those offenses were pretty efficient, and leading into Todd Monken, who has taken off in the NFL and become one of the premium guys out there offensively. When you're putting up 50 a game, your defense doesn't have to be great. It just has to get a few stops here and there. And it's reaching back a little bit, but Gundy, as an offensive guy, kind of got fed up with the defense, giving up a lot of points per game. But again, if you're winning the games, does it really matter if you're giving up yards and or points? So long as you're scoring more points than the other team, what works. And I mentioned Jim Knowles, that defense he had his last season. You're winning games there with defense, and that was a big change for Oklahoma State, and one that unfortunately when he left didn't really sustain for the Cowboys.
Last one here. If Oklahoma State is to win Saturday, what are the keys to victory for them? And then do you have a prediction of how you think the game will go?
Yeah, I think Alan Bowman and cleaning things up and looking how he looked the first couple of games. The Arkansas game, he was okay. He wasn't good, wasn't bad. Tulsa and South Dakota State, he played pretty well. He really did. And you start to think, observing this, okay, he's really sorted some things out in the offseason regarding footwork and not throwing off that back foot and rushing to get the ball out. That's all kind of reverted through these last 2 games. and he needs to play well. He got benched for a while in the Utah game. I don't know if you guys watched that one, but came out after the second half, and they went with Garrett Rangel, the backup for a series or two. So, I guess that kind of indicates that Gundy's seeing it, that there's some issues there. Problem is they don't have anybody really with experience behind him, so you're gambling a little bit if you make that change. And then defensively, as I've hammered on, I guess, a few times, limited busts, limited in big plays, and the quarterback run game. Garrett Green, Gundy talked about him a fair bit on Monday, that he is potentially problematic for defenses, Oklahoma State or anybody else's, when he uses his legs and makes things happen. And I think that's a big concern for Gundy and Oklahoma State going into the game. As far as how it plays out, I think I did this or put this in the questionnaire we had earlier in the week. I have no idea. I don't know what to expect. I was at a similar point through 4 games last year. I don't really know what's going on with this team at this point. They're not playing as well as I think they should. There are some things that we've discussed that you can point to and say they need to clean up coverages, not have busts, need better quarterback play, need Ollie Gordon to get going. And you, as an Oklahoma State fan watching that game last weekend, you had to be looking at it and saying, okay, there is Ollie. That's what we've expected to see all year. Haven't seen it. And then it just goes away. And I think you'll see Casey Dunn, offensive coordinator, maybe focus on trying to get Gordon out in space as opposed to just running between the tackles against the stacked box, and there not being much there. Get him out in space and let him do what he does. The other thing I think I said in that question and answer piece you put up is, Oklahoma State has to come out and clean some things up. If they don't, if they have some of the issues they've had the last 2 games, you could be looking at a 3-game skid that really hadn't happened in the Gundy area. I think maybe they had one his first season, and since then, 2 games is rare. Going to 3 would be just almost unheard of. And heading into a bye week after this weekend, you really need to get something positive going, I think.
Obviously, we will have coverage through the weekend, through the game. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media channels. I think let's see, today is a Wednesday. This will be out either tonight, Wednesday night, or early Thursday morning, depending on some people's certain Wi-Fi situations. But anyways, thank you for listening. If you made it this far, I'm Wesley Shoemaker, joined by Keenan Cummings, and this is the WVSports.com podcast.